Hi everybody, welcome back to another Quarkus demo. In this demo, I'm going to showcase and talk a little bit about Quarkus 3 natively integrate Azure functions. Let's get started. As you probably know, and you have some experience with Quarkus Pro, since the very beginning of the day of the Quarkus community, Quarkus offered Azure function extensions for developers to write deploy cloud-enabled microservices with various endpoints such as REST is reactive and undertow and reactive routes and funky HTTP on Azure function runtime. And then that journey didn't end, but we just arrived in a new era of the Quarkus 3. A new Azure function classes you want to write with the CDI beans, like a context dependency injection with the arc beans, automatically integrate with Quarkus, which means when developer wanted to write some code for Azure functions using inject annotation with the Quarkus, the Quarkus will be automatically bootstrapped in the end. Developer can also select the function's lifecycle scope, such as application and the request, just like a normal Java beans. So you might have one question if I just talk a little bit about Quarkus 3, the native Azure function. So here's the question I'm just expected. What is the difference between Quarkus funky and the Azure function is? And why do I need to use the new Azure function with the Quarkus rather than Quarkus funky? So here's the answer. The Quarkus funky can be only invoked by HTTP triggers at this moment. However, Azure function has various different types of events which can be invoked, such as HTTP trigger and grab triggers and then Cosmos DB trigger, and there are many triggers. So Azure function provide for triggering and binding capability. In the end, the developer have more flexibility to implement your function application as Azure function, which allows you can invoke that function by many different Azure services on top of the cloud. And one more thing, Quarkus Funky was designed with the lowest common denominator to be portable and simple function layer across multiple serverless platforms, such as not only Azure function, but also AWS Lambda, Google Cloud Function, and the Kubernetes Knative, etc. Okay, let's get right into demo, how it works, how to develop new Azure function on top of the Quarkus. So I'm going to use a Quarkus CLI as always, and I'm going to try to add a new extension like a Quarkus-Azure functions. It automatically generates a bunch of files, for example, Maven project, and then Maven wrapper, and the configuration, Docker file, etc. Let me try to change my directory, open the working folder. So today I'm going to try the Cloud IDE. Sometimes you don't have enough time to install a bunch of the tool, for example, the Java, Maven, etc. The Cloud IDE, which is a good option for you, just get started day one. So here's my Quarkus project, like a Quarkus Azure function. It's a project name. When you go to Palm XML, you can take a look at that, the which version you're going to use right now. So when I created this demo, we just write for release Quarkus 3. That's why you can see the CR2 version I'm going to use for this demo. And when you scroll down a little bit, you can find it's already installed your Maven dependency, we can say Quarkus extension. The Quarkus Azure function, which allows me run my application locally and deploy my application Azure function, and the Quarkus CDI injection capability, and also Azure function Java library going to be used for packaging application. So here's the Azure function Maven plugin, which allows the packaging application as well, and you can say the configuration for function name and the resource group on Azure Cloud, and then your service plan. And then here's the one interesting you need to understand. You may be already using the more than Java 11 version, like a higher version, like a 17, 19, etc. But at this moment, Quarkus and Azure function integration only support Java 11 at this. And also, we're going to use Azure function core to the latest version, version 4. So you're going to install locally when you deploy this application. Okay, let's go to generate sample application, which is a function Java file. As you can see, it's very simple. So function name, this is a super interesting part. If you have some experience to develop Quarkus Funky to deploy your application to Azure function previously, you just need to use your func annotation, which allows your function method make it portable and then not only Azure function to another serverless platform. However, when you go to just Azure function implementation as an example, quick start and the blog post, they already ask you, you need to use your function name annotation, which make your method and the class as an Azure function. We're going to do the same way, but we automatically start as a Bootstrap server as a Quarkus runtime for the function application. So first of all, we already add the Azure function name method annotation, and then we're going to use the trigger HTTP trigger. You can change that like a custom DB trigger, a bunch of the other trigger and by the Azure function provide. We have one interesting part. We're going to add the new content is body context using CGI injection, which is already specified in this example with the Quarkus CGI injection. As long as we're going to use this Quarkus injection in your function, automatically Quarkus runtime bootstrap in the end, which is a really convenience way for developers. Let's take a look at that, how to implement greeting service. It's a pretty simple, just return like a hello world. Let me try to change that more pretty proper way. So welcome to Azure function with the Quarkus with your name with a parameter in the URL param. Then back to my function name. And then let me try to function name like a greeting, just like a service name. And then once you change that, you're gonna ask the endpoint already start with the API / your function name. In this case, I just change it to my function name greeting, which means I'm gonna need to access my endpoint API / the end. So how to run my application to the local test? Well, experience Quarkus, you're probably expecting, okay, I'm going to run Quarkus demo, which will give me a live coding capability, which is just super awesome. However, Azure integration with this kind of stuff, you cannot use Quarkus live coding capability at this moment. So that's why you're going to use your Maven packaging tool and the Azure function Maven plugin with the run. It literally simulated your function capability on your local machine. So this is another cool feature in Quarkus 3. So we have a bunch of steps to packaging jar and then just simulated local environment. Now you can see that your endpoint with the 7071 port and then API / your endpoint like a greeting. And then I'm going to try to run using curl command, the Daniel and the localhost API greeting, and just welcome to Azure function with Quarkus and Daniel. And then when you go back to actual runtime log, you can find which trigger you just invoke your function. As you can see, the HTTP trigger just processed that function. It's really happening in the Azure cloud in the production environment. Okay, so before I deploy this function to my Azure cloud, which is Azure Function Apps, I need to log in Azure cloud from my local to the cloud using Azure command line, Azure login, and then you're gonna select which account. I'm not showing my super password. Okay, so here's my Azure portal. You can see a function apps. I'm just refresh. And make sure nothing in there, and I'm going to deploy new function using same Azure Maven plugin. I'm going to use colon deploy. It's pretty simple. And then it's the same packaging jar file, which is a fast jar on Quarkus, and then deploy this application to verify using task unit case. And then once I feed, I'm going to deploy this application. When you take a look at the logs in the runtime, you can find here's interesting. Just starting creating function name, I just created. And then your function name should be unique. That's why there's a random rattling just attended at of your function name. And then you're going to be start in the soon. Is the moment. It depends on how big your application function is. Now we got to deploy and then HTTP trigger URL here. And then the URL is automatically generate the Azure Cloud route URL. I'm just copy this URL when you test by application. Then back to the Azure portal, now we can have a new function here. So when you select the function name, you can find the detail page here. For example, there are a bunch of information, as an example, URL. And then here's interesting, the Azure Monitor actually observe your metric data. Let me try to invoke with the new parameter like a Daniel on Azure Cloud and then the new URL in actual Azure Cloud. And now you can see, welcome to Azure function with the Quarkus Daniel on Azure Cloud. So this is a literally function. So if you don't have any incoming network traffic in this function, that function will be hibernated, just like idle mode. And then you invoke that function, and again, it automatically starts just based on cold start strategy. It takes us a couple of seconds to start up, but in this case, I just invoked that endpoint right after deploying my function. That's why you can see immediately the find out return code. Welcome to Azure function with the Quarkus Daniel on Azure Cloud. You go back to function app. There are utilization, like a memory for free, and the number of count of a function. It takes some time to gather all information. And then you can invoke several times. It will put together and scrap all information in your monitor, which is really helpful for developer to figure out, okay, how many resources I actually using for this function invocation in the end. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching this video again. And please let me know if you have any question. I'm more than happy to address. And thanks all. Have a good rest of the day.